and welcome to the LatinX Business Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Gomez, and if you're looking to demystify the world of business through the raw, authentic stories of Latinx entrepreneurs, you've come to the right place. As someone with an MBA and an IRS enrolled agent license, I spent years helping freelancers, partnerships, and S corporations navigate the often tricky waters of the U.S. tax law. Now, I'm bringing that expertise and passion to this community right here. So thank you for tuning in, and you know what? It's time to talk business.
Seems like I found it.
Hi, Hugo. Yes, you did find it. Thank you for coming on. Again, thank you for coming on the LatinX Business Show.
Appreciate it.
Yes, so let's begin. First question, and the first couple questions I do ask everyone, but what's your preferred pronoun?
You know what? That's an interesting one because I don't know quite what to answer. I guess it would be him or he, but that's when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like I know that I see it on social media for other people, and I guess I'm old school and I don't quite know what the answer to that. And I guess to a certain degree, now that I've turned over 40, I'm just happy being a Hugo. But so
right.
not sure how to answer that, but if from the options that are available, I would guess I say him.
Him, yeah, of course. Yeah, so it's more for like your own personal growth there. It's I don't want anyone to think that you have to choose a pronoun, but I think it's more for visibility in the community. And there's, especially now, it's like you said, I think it's a generational thing where the new generation coming up, they see it everywhere. And I also want them to know that there is differences between generations, but also they also have a choice to identify as they please.
Well,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's the most interesting. Like I said, I'm over 40. I was born in 1977, so you can kind of do the math of what my actual age is. But for instance, I was listening to your previous podcast, and you had a gal there that identified to a certain degree as Chicana.
Yes.
That to me is a completely foreign concept. I to this day, I don't quite get a grasp on it. I guess I feel like it's somebody who has Mexican or Latin American roots, but really their that their parents or they themselves are of the United States, but there's kind of in a mix. And for instance, when I hear Latinx or anything to that effect, I'm still wrapping my mind around what that means.
Right.
And I'm also fighting the challenge of my brain ossifying and not being open to new ways of thinking. But for me, it's very hard when I hear younger people, millennials, for instance, who are identifying as Latinx, because to me, it's new and it's strange. And if I was going to say anything, I would say I'm Latino.
Right,
Mexican truly is what I feel more comfortable with. I'm a very proud Mexican, although I am naturalized.
Oh, no, and that's totally fair, So just to give a little bit of that background, I think, for the listeners too. So before Latinx, because there's been many tries at changing the language through academia mainly, but the A/O came before the X, right? So if you remember that little acronym, before it used to be Latino, Latina /A. So it's like Chicana, Chicano, So the A/O came before the X, which is, I think, really important. But again, that goes back to something that's generational, right? So it's something that I think each generation can take up for their own. But also it's something a little bit regional too, because, for example, you're saying like Chicana and Chicano, that's a very specific period in our history in the US and specifically to the Southern California region. Because if you take that word Chicano and Chicana to the East Coast, well, there's going to be plenty of people that do not identify with that term, right? Because on that side of the coast, we got a lot of Cubans, Puerto Ricans, we got Dominicanos, so it's I think it's very regional, and I think it's very personal to a lot of people. So that's why I want to have all these people come on here and say what's the preference for yourself, because that's really the point here,
And I agree with that. And I also think that there's a lot of value, and it's something that I've been tweeting about for quite some time, especially in the Latino, community, for lack of a better term, which is the fact that there's a lot of differentiation amongst ourselves, that we are not, in fact, one megalithic group, but in fact, again, a lot of times, and I find myself trying to, in a sense, being a veterano here online, where I know and I understand what my what my background is, what my culture is, but I'm also trying to be understanding of other people in the fact that they are using different language. These generations that are coming behind me now are choosing to identify in a different way. I think where we get into a problem as a community in the larger sense is when we start nitpicking with one another. As far as you need to call me this, you need to call me that, you need to respect it. I do think that there needs to be respect, but there needs to be some leeway with people who are not they don't give this so much time to think about. They've been Latino or they have been Hispanic, they've been Mexicano for as long as they have been, or whatever it is. And they're not sitting there necessarily thinking, well, I need to call people of, that identify in a different way, something different. It's not that they're being malicious. It's just that it's not in their purview.
Exactly. Yeah. I like that you're saying that because, I think the respect needs to go both ways. The new generation wants to call themselves these new terms, and the old generation is extremely comfortable with the old terms because that's what they live. And, by all means, that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because so many people out there are like, well, what is Latinx? Like, what does that mean? And, and like I have friends that are like, I'm Latina or I'm Mexican American because I was born here and now, but I come from Mexican descent, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, I totally get that, of course. But just before we go into talking about your business, can we talk a little bit about Mexico? What part of Mexico are you from? And just so we can give the listeners a background of that.
Well, I am from Mexico City, La Ciudad de Mexico. I came here back in the early 80s. Mexico back then, if you know your history, was going through a really bad financial situation. My father, who had been a police officer, a detective, had run into some issues with corruption that was going on in the police force. I didn't know much about it, but I knew that it had gotten bad enough to the point that he didn't feel safe continuing that line of work. That coupled with the financial strains that the government was having in not knowing what to do, the U.S. became, a place where he thought, I can make it there. And so to answer your immediate question, I come from a little alcove of Mexico City called Xochimilco, which was just recently in the news because, it's well known for its canals.
Right.
And, that's pretty, for the most part, where I spent my childhood years. And then I came to the U.S. I came to East LA, right off Brooklyn, back when it used to be called Brooklyn, if anybody remembers that. I
grew up in East LA too. So then, I know. Yeah, I know Brooklyn.
Yeah, so you know how to map quest it. So if you know where what is it, the big taco place around there called King Taco is now, I live right down the street from there for a little bit of time, of a little apartment. That was the first time when I came to the U.S. We lived there for a little while. My dad also for some time worked at El Mercadito. He was head of security there for a long time, and my formative years all the way up to, I'm going to say, 18 is in Boyle Heights, East LA area, went to Garfield High and whatnot. And that's how, to a certain degree, you and I have a couple of degrees of separation. But we definitely did come here illegally, and I became naturalized about 4 or 5 years ago, more than anything because the political winds were changing in such a way as they are now that I didn't feel longer safe in the United States as a legal resident, which I had been for the majority for a long time. I felt that with this, who currently happens to hold the White House, that it wasn't safe to be just a legal resident. That if I didn't become naturalized, I was being foolish, and so I became a U.S. citizen some time ago.
Commend you for bringing that story up because I think that so many people, right, when the 45th president took office, felt that way. It's real, the fear and the thought that something could happen where you're no longer wanted here, or there could be administration and with the laws that could change at any time. That's a real fear that a lot of people in the Latinx community had, especially in the last recent years.
And I will tell you that even to this day, again, I've been naturalized for about 5 years now, that even to this day, there are times that I have worried that on a whim, this guy Randy, would decide, this guy, the president would decide, hey, I'm just going to change my mind. And all of you that you've done is negated because I'm just having a bad day and I want to take it out on some people. And I mean, I've woken up from cold sweats on that. And if that's me, oftentimes I think, what about the dreamers? What about the people in DACA? Never mind those folks. At least they're out and about in the world waiting for their fate to be decided. But also, what about anybody that has been detained who was a child during all of this? I mean, I don't want to bum your listeners out, but the reality is that this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's the times we're in right now, and I think that the fact that you're bringing them up, I'm very appreciative of that, because your experience is a shared experience among a lot of people, So thank you, thank you for bringing that up, definitely. But let's get right into your business. And how did you start in the real estate business?
So I am one of those people that has an interest in a ton of things. I guess if you wanted to call it's unofficial, but I have some type of adult ADD that came from me having a kid ADD, and I like all sorts of things. More than anything, I really came into my own in college, where I realized that I was a real people person, that I enjoyed conversing, I enjoyed telling stories. But I bounced around for a little while. I did customer service. I worked for a dating service for a little while, and but nothing was quite fitting. And then one day, my girlfriend then, who became my wife, we bought a condo online, because if you remember back in, I don't know, the early 2000s, the internet was going to change the world, and we were going to do everything on the internet. And I worked for a company back in the day called carsdirect.com that sold cars online. And so the concept of buying just a house completely on the internet was not crazy to me back then. And now it's become a norm, or at least we do a lot more paperless. But back then that was bananas. Well, to me, it didn't seem so. And so we went through the process, and it was a tough sell. It was still the market was starting to ramp up. It wasn't quite as crazy as it got, but it was starting to ramp up. We were in our early 20s trying to buy, and the real estate agent was lackluster, in my opinion. But I kind of got the experience of, I have better customer service skills than that, even though I'm 20. And I started to do the math on what the commission was for the amount of work that she did. And I thought, well, she really got paid well for not really helping out much. So what if I brought something else to the table that was real quality? And one day on a lark, in the penny saver, somebody was advertising for an assistant, and I was kind of fed up with the job that I was doing, and I just answered. And it happened to be with a recognized broker in the Cerritos area, a Hall of Famer. Sorry, that's what she was called, a Hall of Famer. And she was doing about, at the height of the market when I was with her, we were probably doing about 100 deals a month, which I will tell you is a ton of money. Not that I saw a lot of it. I wasn't getting paid that kind of money, but we were, her and her team were doing about that many deals a month. But that's a lot, But because there was so much volume, in about 3 years' time that I spent with her, I got a college grade education in all things real estate. I mean, I came out of there extremely well versed in all sorts of things. And so when she and I kind of had a parting of the ways, and I decided to focus on getting my degree in sociology and go back to school, by the time all that was said and done, I knew that I was kind of meant to do this, that it talked to all of my senses of entrepreneurship, of being, you have to write a lot of copy, you have to be a photographer, you kind of have to be a designer of sorts, you have to be a good salesperson, you have to know risk management, you have to understand negotiations, and all of those were things that I was very keen to. And also being 20 something, I just also had that kind of moxie of a guy that thinks that he's going to take the world. I mean, I became a manager really fast because of my experience, and I've managed real estate offices for about a decade. And then eventually, well, two things happened that were watersheds. One was the economic crash back in 2008, which was devastating to the industry. And it's changed to the point that it's very different than what it was now. I mean, then. And the second thing was, obviously, I got married and my wife and I had children. And that changed my focus from career-driven, hour hours upon hours a day to what does it mean now to be a father, and how much do I want to spend in this industry focusing to it at the expense of my family. And so I had to make some changes along the way.
No, and that's fair. I feel like so many people, I think just even myself, and I'm gonna say like, when I was younger, when I came out of college, I felt like, I didn't know what I was doing in my life. I had these jobs that wouldn't pay me well, and it was a lot of part-time work, I guess. I felt almost like I had put so much value into that. Becoming a professional was my end goal, I guess, growing up. Like that was all I was taught. So if I didn't have any value in that, and I had all these part-time jobs and I wasn't getting paid well, then I felt like I didn't have value in myself, right? But I think that changes with generation, with time. But no, I totally get that. Then now you've switched over, and so I'm guessing now you're working less, but now you're still working a lot, I bet. At the end of the day.
It's funny. And that's a really good question. Am I working less? I don't think so. I'm just working different. And what I mean by that is this. There's an old story, and I don't remember who wrote it, but but I read it when I was a kid, and it always struck me because I remember how hard my mom worked. And my mom did not have a cush job. When we first got to the US, we were illegal, and so you got the work that you could get, and a lot of it was not going to be the most prestigious kind of work. I mean, she cleaned toilets for 20 years. She gave up her hands to the job because of the arthritis that she developed over time. And, to when my mom left work after 20 years of working at this hospital that she was with, she was making under $12 an hour after all that time.
Wow.
But her work ethic was amazing, and I never forgot it. Yeah. But the story that I remember reading in high school was, again, my mother never worked, and it's basically a guy whose mother has died and calls the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and is asking about her benefits. And along the way that the woman that's on the other line of the phone call is punching up the lady's information, very quickly says something along the lines of, "Oh, I'm sorry, your mother never worked. We have for Social Security, but after all this time, she never worked, or we don't have anything in the system." And in his mind, in the story, he reverts back to all of the things that his mother did for him over the years. The driving, the cooking, the cleaning, everything that a parent does for their child. But because it's not taxable, or it's not taxed, right? As far as the IRS service, the parent had never been in their system, therefore never worked. And I'm probably getting parts of the stories wrong, but it's what it got to me was that now, again, switching gears, my wife and I had long conversations about what my business was going to look like, what the transition would be like from a full-time guy to an independent contractor, and what hits we might have as a family unit from making those changes. But one of the things that we discussed, and what I wanted to make paramount to my wife, and she understands it, is that there is so much value to the home front from me being a stay-at-home dad and to a certain degree a part-time real estate agent. And so to answer your question, there's a ton that I do, but it's refocused onto my children. And so the ROI, the return on investment, is really what that generation would look like. With that being said, I do run a real estate business. It's because of the length of time that I've been in the industry, a lot of it is referral based. So I kind of get to pick and choose what clients I work with. And it's not at the pace of what it used to be, because I'll be honest with you, real estate is not for everybody. It's a really tough business. It's a terrific business, but it's not easy, and people believe that they do. It's not one of those fly by night businesses like accounting.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like you in real estate, you are everything. You are the entrepreneur. You are also the marketer. You are also the stager. You are also, checking out listings for your clients. It's a lot of work. No, I've worked with and talked to some real estate agents, and the amount of hours they put in even just for one sale of one home,
Well,
right? So
even right now, while you and I are sitting down and we're talking like this, I am getting pings from. I'm waiting for a set of loan docs to come in on a transaction, and it's something that we've been waiting for a while, and so that's in the back of my head while we're discussing it. But at the same time, it's one of those things where I'm thinking about that, but I'm also thinking about the rabbit that my kids found over the weekend, and that hopefully they took it out while I'm recording this so that it gets a little bit of air. So it's this
yeah.
interesting mix in that's, I guess, what I have found in my industry now, or in my career now, is that I've been able to blend those things together, that I can be both at the same time. If this time, this COVID time, has showed us anything to a degree, to the average person like me, it has been that the way that we've understood work is, it can change. It can change the paradigm of what we consider work and where our priorities are. Now, whether that will stay or not, that's a different story. But I know that it is different for people in my situation that have those luxuries, because I do think it's a luxury.
Yeah. So you know what? To your statement about being self-employed, right? Which it does allow you the flexibility to be able to take on this role as a stay-at-home dad, right? So many people, I feel like, would look at people who were self-employed before the pandemic and say, like, what do you do all day? Nothing? Right? That's like the first word that come out of their mouth. But trust me, if someone's working from home, now they are a full-time employee. They are also taking care of the kids. They also have to clean. Someone knocked on the door. There's a delivery. There's an interruption. It's a lot of work. So now that the pandemic happened, I feel like more people can understand the self-employed person that's working from home. Because before that, it was just a few select people who were self-employed. So, for me, the pandemic, I feel, brings a little bit, in a weird way, even though we're very much separated, this sense of community that so many people are working from home now, right?
Oh, yeah.
And trying to make ends meet that way. But yeah, okay. So let's move it along. I mean, so in terms of like your business, what are some specific challenges you face as a Latinx realtor?
Well, I will say that let's talk about markets, right? And let's talk about the San Gabriel Valley specifically, where I live. And I know that you have listeners from all across, but if you think of California, we're specifically talking about Southern California, and it's things that are, east of Los Angeles, the Pasadena area, heading all the way out to maybe, Claremont and that, and on the north side, obviously Monrovia, or Arcadia, where I happen to live, in as far south as, let's say, as, I don't know, not Irwindale, but El Monte or Covina, West Covina. So that's the San Gabriel Valley, as I kind of loosely define it. And the challenge, I think, is twofold. On the Arcadia area, there has been an influx for some time of an Asian American market. I mean, Asian American buyers coming into the area. And I think that there is a lack of understanding between the groups that prohibits them to give trust to somebody who's Latino, right? We're just just kind of different people. We have different languages, and so we don't mix very well. And so what I found that for myself, whenever I host open houses in that part of town, is that I become, to a certain degree, a glorified door opener, because, and I'm not, and again, this is all blanket statements. Not everybody's the same, but for the most part, I have seldom had the opportunity to write offers for, an Asian customer, because either they already have an agent, which is fair, or B, there are cultural differences and there are language differences that we cannot bridge. So that's one component. The other component, and that's typically what I have been dealing with most over these last few years, is the fact that even though the real estate market was very tough on the San Gabriel Valley, to the point that there was a lot of homes that were lost to foreclosure and whatnot, that it has rebounded very well. Our pricing here, it's still bananas. And this was going on even prior to COVID, but the housing crisis has made it so that people are not leaving their homes like they used to, right? Because the problem is that if you sell a home here in Southern California, where do you go to? Anywhere else in California is still going to be expensive. But moreover, and on top of that, the property taxes that you will pay in perpetuity wherever you go may end up being more expensive than where you just left. And so that becomes very prohibitive to somebody who's older that just wants to downsize. But if they go to a condo or something smaller down the lane and they're going to end up paying more in property taxes every single year, then what's the point? So they stay. And the challenge then becomes, if they're staying put longer than they would have, right? Then whatever inventory does come up, whenever houses become available, that just gets bid up. And it really takes a lot of first-time buyers a long time to locate everything. Where I think the Latino community, where the real challenge is, or at least what I'm saying, is that anybody who is not middle class, they have to work harder, they have to save longer, they have to write offers for a bigger period of time because there is just so little inventory. I mean, think about it. I'm not quite sure where you're at in LA, but our medium, our houses here start in the 600,000-700,000, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have any kids, but this is the exercise that I do with most people. Let's say that you were going to buy a $500,000 home, right? And it's you're coming out of college and you just have the debt that you incurred from loans, because it's sometimes very hard for your parents to put you through college for the whole thing. So you have a little bit of debt. You may buy a car or whatnot, and so you have that debt as well. It's not like you're socking any kind of money away for retirement, which you really should. And I think one of the things that I tell young people when I do high school fairs or career fairs is that the paramount to know is you want to know a good accountant and you want to know a good financial planner, and hopefully they work together, this is something that I've done for many, many years, because those two need to talk to one another so that you understand what your goals are. You couple that with a good real estate agent and you start creating a good financial team for yourself. But a lot of young folks don't do that. The concept of saving is not very well taught at our schools, I don't think. So going back to the example, if you buy yourself a car, you want to have a good time, maybe you're renting or maybe you're not, you're living back at home, but either way, there's expenses there, right? And then all of a sudden you decide at, 30, I'm going to buy the average house, and that house is going to be $500,000. It doesn't get you much here in the San Gabriel Valley. It's going to be a starter home. Have you saved up 20% to put down on a home so that you can be competitive? That's $100,000.
Right.
And for a lot of people, that is a tough bill. I don't know about you, but I know that when I got out of high school, or when I graduated college back in 2004, there was no way that I was going to go to my parents and ask for $80,000, right? And maybe they said, well, you know what, Hugo, we'll get it for you, right? We'll sell off whatever we got and we can get you maybe 60. But there was 3 of us. It's myself and my sisters. How much were they going to get?
Yeah.
Now go to your average Latino household in California, of families that are just trying to get through. This COVID thing has not made it any easier for them. And now you're asking that when their kids are ready, if they get them through college, to at that point give them 20% down towards the purchase of a house. It's near impossible for most folks. And so what happens for me is when I work with a lot of Hispanic clients, and one of the things that I have is that's my pet peeve is I am not going to take advantage of you, because I think that also happens a lot in the community, and that sucks. A lot of unscrupulous agents that are out there. So my thing is I'm going to give you the facts as they are, but that also means that I'm going to tell you what the ugly component of it is, and that is the fact that it's going to take you a long time to find homes, a very long time. It means a lot.
So what would you say is the average? Like, how long are people taking right now in this market to find a home in the LA area?
Well, the LA area, that's tough. I'm going to say this. I'm going to go back to the San Gabriel Valley. It's taken me 6 to 8 months to find somebody a home. And when I mean find them a home, that means to actually get them into escrow, into a home. That doesn't mean that we haven't written offers. That doesn't mean that we've haven't out there and looked. That means that it's six to 8 months of offer and rejection, offer and rejection, offer and rejection, to the point of finding something.
Right. That's what I was going to say, because, one thing's writing an offer, but it being accepted by the seller is a whole nother their thing. And then you have other offers are being written because everyone's looking at homes on the weekends or, booking appointments to view these homes. And somebody else might come in with the all cash offer
All
too,
cash
right?
offer, or some people come with 20%. And then so I have a client who I'm dealing with this right now. They are a family of four, young people, but they only have 3.5% down because they're going to go FHA, and that's what they're able to manage. That's what they've been able to save up. But how do you compete when you have cash offers from investors or people that have access to those kind of funds, or people that have 20% down and they can tell a better story?
Yeah, it almost seems to me, Hugo, that there should be like a new law written where the amount of where that money's coming from shouldn't matter as long as financially the bank can guarantee that these people have the money to put down. If that would be possible, if I was into politics, then that's what I would do. But I see your point. Like, this is an obstacle that not only, a young person might encounter, but a huge portion of the Latino community might be encountering, especially now in Los Angeles, that homes just keep going up. This year alone, I've heard that home prices have just shot up the roof like crazy. And we're in a pandemic. People don't have work. People don't have money, right?
Well, yeah.
So it boggles my
I
mind.
mean, you got to take into account that all of those people now that we're going to buy, even struggling with that cannot buy, now have to rent. And so that also puts a crunch on the rental market because landlords can ask pretty much for whatever they want. And that's where, for instance, in this last election, we had these debates about rent control and what that could mean. It's a very trying system.
Right. Wow. Okay. So, I mean, in terms of when you started off in like the real estate business, is there anything that you would particularly want to know? Like you wish there was something someone had showed you before becoming a real estate agent?
That's a good question. I guess what I would say is that in order to be successful at it, you cannot do it as a part-time job. You might be able to downshift once you've gotten started. In the very beginning, it is a commitment to it. But I think, though, that if you're a young person and you're entrepreneurial, it is a fantastic business. And the investment to get started in it versus, to the reward, I think it makes a lot of sense. And if you're going to be here in California, or if you're in a market that demographically is changing, I think, and you speak the language, there's a lot of opportunity there. And what I mean by young people is this. The average real estate agent, at least back when I got started, was somewhere in their late 60s. That has been shifting over the last few years, and also demographically that has been changing over the last few years. I don't have exact statistics, but I know that the industry is getting younger and younger. But one of the things where I think millennials or people that are in their 30s, perhaps but definitely young people, maybe like right out of college, where they can benefit of this is they don't have a lot of overhead as far as day-to-day living kind of thing. Hopefully, they're living on their own or whatnot, so they have a lot of income that they could afford to the industry. And I mean, getting your license is under $1,000, right? Going through all of the licensing takes under that. Finding a brokerage, you get paid by commission, so you shouldn't have to be paying anything out of pocket there. And still be with a good brokerage. So, but where I think young people have the leg up is that they are so comfortable with technology, whereas I struggle with a lot of the people that I have grown up with, for lack of a better term, in the industry, who struggle with it, who a lot of them came up at a time when they were using carbon paper, and now everything is paperless. But over and on top of that, there are such great social marketers out there nowadays that are just, that they're just so smart. They are used doing I'm not even that up to date with it, but they're doing the TikTok, or they're using the Instagram, or they're going on the Twitter machine, or doing 1,000 things that is smart and intelligent and really putting themselves out there. And so if you're going to be using it anyways, why not using it to promote your business? And I really do think young people can use that tool to their advantage.
Yeah, everything's in their hands when you think about it, with the laptop, with the phone, with the computer, like it's all within your hands reach. I was talking to another entrepreneur earlier, and it's all there. Like Instagram, you can get instant feedback, right? someone can tell you like, I don't like the way you did this, but you might be like, instead of thinking like, oh, my work is not good here on Instagram, it's actually like a
Right.
focus group that's happening, you know? So yeah, no, I totally get you where I feel like, you know, everything's moving online now. So that really is the way to go. And if, like you said, if we've learned any lessons from the pandemic, one is that everyone can work from home too, right? But then two, the other thing is that all these businesses can run online. So the traditional brick and mortar can almost be eliminated
Yeah.
if you really think about it, right? Now, whether people want to acclimate to that or not, that's a different story. I feel like there's so many people that say like, if it's not broken, why fix it, right? And that's a, you know, I think to a certain degree, sometimes there's things where you're like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't fix something that's not broken. But a lot of times the innovation comes from times of necessity and times of hardship. And that's what I've just been seeing this whole pandemic play out. Is like people are being forced to go online. People are being forced to be like, think about how else you can, you know, do work. So for me, I don't want to say that the pandemic has been all bad things, because it is, but I do think that it's brought a lot of innovation and alternative mind thinking for a lot of people.
Well,
But
to
yes,
that point, real quick,
I guess
and I want to go back real fast to the Great Depression. And yeah, and again, I'm
okay.
a fan of history, so I don't know all the details, but I know that great fortunes were made during that time of depression. There were a lot of people that utilized that opportunity to seize real estate, to invest. In pandemics, this pandemic is terrible in the in an economic way, in a personal way, in a societal way, definitely devastating, but there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think that there is a great divide. The challenge will be if Latinos get swept up in the tidal wave of it, or if they surf through it and succeed. And but I think it requires a paradigm shift on how we look at ourselves. And again, I know that's a very big, broad statement, but I'm here to empower young people and Latino people, Latinx people, and the Chicanos too. Dude, this is a time, but you gotta stop. You know, let's shift our focus.
I agree 100%. You know, it's almost like all the tools are there and people are not thinking about it in that sense. So man, if it's one lesson someone can take from this podcast episode, is like there's so much opportunity right now, and you just need to be a little bit creative, and then you can come up with something great, especially right now. But Hugo, tell me more about, I guess, the real estate industry. What would be like a good resource for people, for someone who's trying to buy a home right now? What should they be doing, you know, or prepping for, or where can they go and read like articles about what's happening in the market, especially
I am
in this
old
market that we
fashioned,
live
and
in?
well, I'm old school for myself. And so what I always recommend is that people start out with Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you have never come across it, I think it's a terrific book. But again, it's a way to look at money, to look at investment, and to realize that a lot of the things that we were told were positives can actually be liabilities. And I'm not going to explain it any better than Kiyosaki did in the book, but I think that it's definitely worth a read. And it's a super cheap book. You can find it anywhere. Again, Rich Dad Poor Dad. The second thing that I think people need to do, and it's when you go to buy a house, when you go to invest in real estate, and that's the key word. You got to invest in real estate. It's not just buying a house; it's an investment. When you get to that point, that is actually the last thing in a series of steps that you got to be taken. When I write offers for people, I am telling a story of who they are to a potential buyer, so to a seller. So that seller thinks, okay, if I sell this, my home to this person, they are going to be able to qualify, act proactively, and ultimately in 30 to 40 or 45 days, they're going to buy the house, and I'm going to get what I need, and they're going to get the keys to their property. But before all that, you got to be able to have all of the, certain chapters written so that you can have that final ending turn out to be, a happy one. So outside of the Rich Dad Poor Dad thing, you got to have a good accountant on your hand. You have to have worked with somebody for a while. Because when it comes to your financials, right, when a bank is going to look at what you have got to have good books, and so that somebody's going to want to lend to you. Equally with that is a good financial manager, or in somebody who is giving you sound advice as far as where should you have your money and what is your long-term plan as far as those funds are concerned. We got lucky when my wife and I were very young that somebody knocked on our door, and it was one of these financial companies that, although we didn't end up with them, it gave us the idea that, hey, you know, yeah, we need to talk to somebody. Yeah. But what is it? Compounding interest, and open to the concept of the fact that, you know, money can beget money, but you have to put it somewhere and in the right places so that it can earn upon itself, and you got to leave it alone even during downtimes. And and because I was part of what's called a BNI group, but it's basically business to business kind of networking groups that I was part of.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
I've heard of them.
The tax person that I work with, great guy, and the financial planner that I work with, fantastic gal. They happen to know each other very well, and because they knew each other well, and because we developed trust, and because obviously everything has to be on the level, we made a fantastic team for a good 10 years. My accountant has since retired, and so now I'm with somebody else. But that trifecta of having a good financial planner, a fantastic accountant, and then in my case, I like to think of myself as a really good real estate agent. It really helped us kind of look at, you know, investment and what we wanted to do with it, and basically how we wanted to save for the future, not only just for ourselves, but obviously we have kids that we want to put through college and what that means. But I think a lot of young folk don't even get anywhere close to that. And I don't know that within the Latino community, we sit down and we talk to them about, hey, mijo, you have to go out there and find yourself an accountant.
You know what? I don't think so. I mean, I know it does happen definitely between like second generation Latinos and stuff, but I also feel like, you know, like if someone's listening to us and they don't have somebody, they can always reach out to you, right? And they can reach out to me. You're in real estate, I'm in accounting. There's a ton of financial advisors out there, but you know, I think the bigger thing is for someone to actually make the call, to reach out and say, I need help, right? Because we've been taught in our communities for so long that we're very strong and that we can do things on our own and that we don't need somebody else to help us. But it does take a big part of us to humble ourselves down and say, like, I need help, you know? But I agree with you. I totally agree with you that people need to have these people on their team, because now you have a separate set of eyes that's looking out for your financial well-being. And so many people don't have that, right? Like even my parents, I can tell you, growing up, that's not something they looked into, because their main concern was, I need to make money, I need to provide for my kids, and I need to survive. So I think also it's once you get past that generational mind shift, then you can start thinking about what's the next step, what's the next level. But again, generations, right? Sometimes it takes several generations to get out of poverty. But Hugo, tell me how they can get a hold of you. How can the listeners, if they're listening right now, how would they make contact with you if they want to reach out to you and ask you about real estate?
The simple thing would be go onto my website, hugotorres.com. Mostly all my contact information is there. As far as Instagram, again, it's instagram.com/Hugo Torres. And if you go onto the Twitter machine, I'm under Hugo's posts. I have my own podcast that I started a long time ago. It's not real estate related. It's more my pontifications about life, where I take you know, things that have happened to me over the years, or concepts, or that I'm going through, and I expand on them beyond, you know, the Twitter posts that I typically have on there. And so that's where people can find me.
Yeah, and you know why I like that your podcast is about who you are in your day-to-day life. That so many times, like I'm gonna admit it, you know, I'm one accountant in 1,000 in the LA area. You are one real estate agent in many in the Los Angeles area, but they really want to know who you are. And for the most part, you know, people will hire you because of who you are and how you're going to take care of them, right? So I love that you have your own podcast about your daily life. So yes, we definitely invite the listeners to go on and listen. And I guess for my final question, Hugo, what would be a podcast, a book, or a quote that you would recommend to our listeners?
A podcast, a book that I would recommend to our listeners. I think a podcast that has really helped me over the years, because it's tough to wake up as of late, look at the world that we live in, and think that these are not the worst times any human being has ever lived. It's very easy to do that. And we certainly have a lot of evidence to that point. With that being said, there's this podcast which is fairly well known, but it's called Hardcore History by Dan Carlin, and where he does deep dives, not as a historian, but as a fan of history, about the different world wars, about the Chinese, about all of these different conflicts that there have been throughout. But one of the things that this taught me is that we actually, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, but really, truly, we live in one of the safest times to be a human being. Now, it's relative because, you talk to somebody in a third world country and they're going to tell you otherwise. But as far as the U.S. is concerned, we live in actually relatively safe times in spite of the challenges that we have. And in addition, it has helped me see that a lot of what we're experiencing is also cyclical, that we've been here before. It's been called many different things in the past, but we are not very all that different than human beings from, 5,000 years ago. And whenever I get really down on myself and I think, oh my gosh, this is the worst day ever. And then I think, in all reality, I get to wake up, hug my kids, play with a new rabbit, do a podcast in the middle of the day and get dinner put together on the table for my wife. I mean, that's talk about first world problems. And so I try not to carp as much. And also what it has helped me do is be more community focused. That since I am in a relatively good place and my basic needs are being met, that it is incumbent upon me to help out other people through either the written word or physically or in whatever way possible without sacrificing the home front, that there's a lot more that I can give. And so I hope I answered the question. I think that, again, knowing how bad things can get can help you realize that you got it pretty good.
Yes. Oh my God, Hugo, thank you so much. I think you've given us so much information, and I hope, if someone's out there listening and they need more help with real estate, or they're first-time home buyers, or they're just Latinos in the Latinx community, I hope, they really do reach out to you, because I think you have a wealth of information that you can provide with your real estate services. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Randy, I really appreciate it. You have yourself a good one.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your network. Your support helps our Latinx business community grow stronger with every listen, and I truly invite you to connect with us. Send us your questions, your comments, or even your own business stories to randy@rgtaxes.com. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, keep learning, keep building your business, and keep growing your business mindset.